Okay, imagine this for a second. A single day across an entire country where 90% of all women just stop working.
And we mean all work.
Right. Not just their paid jobs. We're talking everything. The schools basically shut down, the banks close, hospitals are on life support.
And then at home, nothing. No cooking, no cleaning, no childcare.
Sounds like, I don't know, the beginning of a sci-fi movie.
It does, but it's exactly what we're diving into today. This actually happened. It was a historical movement in Iceland back in 1975 called the Women's Day Off, or Kvennafrí.
And it was an event so powerful, it didn't just, cause a few problems for a day. It fundamentally changed the entire direction of the country.
Absolutely. So today we're pulling from a bunch of analyses, even a recent documentary, to really get at the heart of this.
And our mission is to figure out how this one single strategic day helped Iceland become, well, the global benchmark for gender equality. And more importantly, what lessons that holds for a country like Japan, which is facing some very similar hurdles.
And this isn't just based on feelings or anecdotes. What's so fascinating is that Iceland consistently tops the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Index, the GGI.
Year after year, they're always number one.
So to really get Iceland's success, we have to start there. We have to understand what this index actually measures, and then we can see the sharp contrast with Japan's situation.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The GGI, it's not just like counting the number of women in the workforce, is it? It's more nuanced than that.
Much more. The Gender Gap Index is so critical because it's not just measuring the presence of women, it's measuring the gap, the opportunity gap.
Explain that distinction for us, because that's really the core of it, isn't it?
It is. I mean, think of it this way. A country could have half its workforce be women, but if they're all in the lowest paying jobs with no path to leadership,
And there's still a huge gap.
a massive gap. So the GGI tracks 4 key areas to get the full picture. First is economic participation and opportunity. So labor force numbers, but also, crucially, the wage gap.
Okay, what's second?
Second is educational attainment. Basically, are girls and women completing school at all levels, from primary up to university at the same rate as men?
And third.
Health and survival. That one tracks things like life expectancy. And then the last one, and this is a big one, is political empowerment.
So representation in government.
Exactly. Are women actually part of the decision-making process? In parliament and ministerial roles, that's where the power is.
Right. And this is where it gets really, really interesting when you look at the global rankings. Iceland is at the top. But then you look at a country like Japan.
And the contrast is it's stark. It's a profound systemic issue. Japan is near the bottom among developed economies.
Sometimes comparable to nations with, far fewer resources.
And that's the thing. Japan is an economic powerhouse. But the data shows this structural inequality is just incredibly deep-rooted.
So here's the puzzle. Japan has a very highly educated female population. The educational attainment score is high. So where? Where are they losing all those points?
They're bleeding points in 2 specific areas: political empowerment and economic participation and opportunity.
So the 2 pillars at the top.
Exactly. It tells you that Japanese women are educated, they're qualified, they're ready to lead. But the system itself, the structure, is blocking them from getting into those leadership roles, whether that's in corporate boardrooms or in the government.
So the foundation is strong, but the ceiling is, well, concrete.
A perfect way to put it. And that sets the stage perfectly for Iceland's story. To see how they broke that ceiling, we have to go back to before 1975.
Because Iceland wasn't always this beacon of equality.
Oh, not at all.
Sure.
The sources describe it as a society totally dominated by what you'd call manly industries.
Fishing, farming.
Fishing, dairy farming, that sort of thing. The cultural expectation was crystal clear. Men were the providers. Women were, for the most part, expected to run the domestic sphere.
And all that work at home was, of course, unpaid and completely invisible to the economy.
Invisible. Until October 24th, 1975, the day of the Women's Day Off. The scale of this is it's stunning.
Give us the details.
Over 90% of women across the entire country. And the key was what they refused to do. It was all work.
Paid work, so banks, factories, schools shut down.
But also, and this was the masterstroke, all the unpaid work, cooking, cleaning, childcare, shopping, it all just stopped.
Just think about the chaos. The entire economy grinds to a halt. But then on top of that, society itself stops functioning.
Right. The sources are full of these amazing anecdotes. Fathers having to drag their kids to work because there was no childcare.
And stores selling out of sausages because they were the easiest thing these men could figure out how to cook.
That's it, exactly. And that was the whole point. It wasn't just a protest. It was a high-impact, real-world demonstration. It was designed to make men tangibly feel the weight of all that labor, both the visible and the invisible.
It was like a national lesson in economics and sociology, all in one day.
A lesson you couldn't ignore.
And the political framing of it was just brilliant. They had to get the housewives on board, a huge and more conservative group. So they made a very specific choice in what to call it.
Yes, they deliberately called it a holiday or a day off, not a strike.
Because strike sounds radical. It has union connotations.
It does. And the organizers knew that a lot of women, especially homemakers, would have been uncomfortable with that word. By calling it a day off, they reframed it. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a day of solidarity.
It let everyone participate without feeling like they were being too political or radical. It became a unifying national event.
And it bridged all these social and class divides. It was truly universal.
So let's connect that day to the results. The impact was fast.
Incredibly fast. I mean, the very next year, the Icelandic parliament passed a gender equality law. They had to acknowledge the economic reality that the day off had just slapped them in the face with.
That was just the start, right?
Oh, yeah. The really stunning moment came just 5 years later, 1980. Iceland elects Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, the world's first democratically elected female president.
Wow, just 5 years. That collective action totally changed the public's mind about what a leader could look like.
It shattered that perception. And once she was in power, the legislative changes just kept coming. They really started to embed equality into the law.
What were some of the big policy changes?
Well, the gender ratio in parliament started moving towards 50-50 pretty quickly. They also set up these amazing parental leave systems.
Where it's equal for both parents.
Equal and, crucially, with a use it or lose it portion for fathers. So it wasn't just an option. It created an expectation that fathers take the leave. It permanently shifted the culture around childcare.
That's huge.
And it didn't stop there. As recently as 2018, they passed a law that flat out prohibits the gender wage gap. Companies legally have to prove they're paying people equally for equal work.
That is it's incredible progress. But I have to ask the critical question. Did this one day solve everything? Did Iceland just become a perfect utopia?
Not quite. And this is where the analysis gets really important. A country can have amazing equality metrics, but still have blind spots.
And Iceland found one of those blind spots the hard way.
They did. In the 2008 financial crisis, the postmortem analysis was really clear. The banking sector was completely dominated by men. And the decision-making culture was, well, it was aggressive, it was high risk.
And it led to a total economic collapse.
It was a major factor. So the failure of that male-centric system actually became a second catalyst for change.
So the crisis itself forced another evolution.
Precisely. It led to new laws requiring diversity on corporate boards and in high-level financial decision-making. It proved that progress isn't a single event. You don't just cross a finish line. It's continuous.
Okay, so now let's take all these lessons and shift our focus to Japan. Because Japan faces a very similar internal divide to the one Iceland had before 1975. This schism between working women and homemakers.
And that schism is a major barrier to the kind of unified action Iceland managed to create. In Japan, there's still a lot of cultural respect for the role of the dedicated homemaker. But there's also an economic and legal system that can drive a wedge between that group and women in the workforce.
And this is where a policy that seems like a good thing can actually create a problem. You brought up a very specific one. The third insurance coverage system. Can you break that down for us?
Right. This is a really important and technical point. The third insurance system basically gives national pension and health insurance coverage to non-working spouses, who are almost all women, as long as their income stays below a certain pretty low cap.
Around 1 million yen a year or something.
Exactly. So on the surface, it's a safety net. But in practice, it creates this huge disincentive for a woman in a part-time job to earn more money.
Because if she makes 1 yen over that cap,
boom, she loses her coverage, and suddenly her family has to pay for it out of pocket. It's a massive financial penalty for working more.
So it traps women in low-wage part-time work.
It reinforces that role. It deepens the economic divide between women who rely on that system and women who are trying to build a full-time career. It makes it so much harder for them to see their struggles as shared.
That's a fascinating insight. that a system designed to support one group can actually fracture the female population as a whole.
Yeah.
But you also pointed out something about Japanese history that I think challenges a lot of assumptions.
Yes. We have to push back on the idea that these restrictive gender roles are some kind of ancient, unbroken Japanese tradition.
Because they're not.
The sources are really clear on this. Ancient Japan had female emperors. It had incredibly famous and powerful female writers. There were periods where women held significant societal power.
So where do the current restrictions come from?
A lot of them were actually imported. During the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, Japan was modernizing rapidly, and it adopted a lot of Western legal and social structures,
Including ideas about gender roles.
including very specific European models of a male-headed household and rigid employment structures. So in many ways, these aren't ancient Japanese traditions. They were foreign imports that replaced older, sometimes more equitable, native customs.
That completely reframes the whole debate. It's not about abandoning tradition. It's about re-examining a specific historical period. So what does this mean for the future? Are we seeing any attempts to replicate Iceland's success?
We are. The sources mention that some women's groups in Japan are planning their own version of a Women's Day off.
Really? When?
They seem to be targeting International Women's Day, March 8th. The potential is there, especially if they can show how policies like that third insurance system are structural barriers that ultimately harm all women, whether they're working or not. You know, what's so fascinating when you look back is that the Women's Day off worked because it wasn't abstract. It made the invisible visible. It took all that essential labor at home, at the office, and put a price tag on it by showing what happens when it's gone.
It made it undeniable.
Undeniable. So the challenge for any movement like this today, in Japan or anywhere else, is to bridge those internal divides and show how these systems that we sometimes mistake for tradition are actually just policy choices. And policy choices can be changed.
That's the perfect takeaway. The second a society is forced to see the full value of a group's contribution by having it taken away, policy change isn't just possible, it's almost unavoidable. It's an incredibly powerful tool. So we've given you the history, the data, and the specific policies that create and maintain these gaps. We've seen how societies can change when the invisible is made visible. So here's something to think about. If a day off can highlight the value of traditional labor, what other kinds of unseen social contributions could we make visible to drive change? Think about all the volunteer work, the mentorship, the emotional labor that holds our communities together. What would happen if all of that just stopped for a day? Think about the invisible pillars in your own life, and what would happen if they suddenly weren't there?